This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Alright, let me explain what we're going to do, what books of prime entry are. Last time I kept saying, obviously when we're doing, certainly for the exam, when we're doing all our debits, credits and everything, we assume we're doing it by hand, not with computer. We remember that bit? And it was fine. I mean, certainly those little things we did last time. You sell goods for cash, debit cash, credit sales. In the exercises last time, when you've only got, 10 entries, there's no big problem, with your T accounts. You would agree? But in real life, it's actually going to be rather ridiculous that you've got your book with all the T accounts in it. And okay, you sell goods for cash. Debit cash, you turn to the cash page and debit it. And then you turn to the sales page and you credit it. Yep. But the trouble is, you're doing it thousands of times a day. Obviously there'll be thousands of sales and thousands of purchases. And it's going to be just impossible. Every time you sell anything, debit cash, credit sales. Or maybe you sell on credit, debit receivables, credit sales. Then you pay telephone, turn to the cash page, credit cash, turn to telephone, debit telephone. You with me? To keep going backwards and forwards thousands of times a day. Firstly, inevitably you're going to make mistakes. I think you'd accept. You turn to the wrong page and things. And secondly, of course, the book's going to get very full very quickly if there are thousands of transactions a day. And so in practice, we actually do it slightly differently. I mean, the debits, credits themselves don't change. But we have a way of avoiding keep having to go backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards. Okay? And what we do is this. I said last time there are really 4 standard types of transactions. Most transactions, day by day, you're either receiving cash, debit cash, credit somewhere, or you're paying cash, or you're buying on credit, or you're selling on credit. You agree? I know other things can happen, but day by day, most transactions are one of those 4. And so what we'll do, to make things efficient, I'll employ, first of all, one bookkeeper, I'll employ Liga, and I'll say your job is to keep a note every time we receive any cash. That's all I want her to do. She's not going to do any debits, credits. But her job, every time we receive cash, I just want her to make a note. I'll give her a book. You don't need to copy this down. I'll give you some sheets in a minute. But I'll give her a book. I'll call it Cash Receipts Book. I'll say you don't need to write anything. But I'll give her a book and I'll say, all I want you to do, every time we receive money, make a note in the book. And so, maybe the first thing that happens, maybe the business receives 10,000 from the owner to start the business. Yeah? We've received 10,000. So she'll write down receipt of 10,000. She'll write something against it, whatever she wants. That's sensible. She might write against it owner, because the owner paid in the money. She's not done any debit credit. I'm not worried. I'll worry about that later. But at least I've got a note that we've received cash. Clear? Maybe a few days later, we sell some goods for cash and we receive 1,000. Fine. She makes a note. We've received 1,000. She'll write something against it. There's no rules. She might say, oh, it was Mr. X bought the goods. She might just write Mr. X against it because he was the one who gave us the money. All right? But all she'll do, again, every time we receive money, she'll make a note. We've got to have a record, and we've got a record. Again, we've done no debits, credits at all. But I can worry about the debits, credits later, as long as we've got a note. You with me? One little problem there's going to be, though. We are going to need to do debits, credits. Liga's not very intelligent. She doesn't know about debits, credits. Her job is simply to keep a list, you know. I understand double entry, so I'm going to come in later and do the debits, credits. But one big danger's going to be if I come in and say, let me borrow your list and I'll do the debits, credits. The danger is I come and look at that 10,000, and for the debit credit, I need to know what that was. You know, I'm going to debit cash. Oh, it was capital. I'll credit capital. Agreed? But one big danger is that Liga's got this great long list of receipts. And I come back and I say, what was that 10,000? And maybe we've forgotten. We don't want to waste time looking up the paperwork. And so I asked Liga to do one more thing. Every time she receives money, she'll make a note, 10,000 from the owner. But while she's got the papers in front of her, and she knows that it's the owner, it's capital, she'll have little columns. She'll have a little column headed up, capital. And she'll say, right, we've had 10,000, I've made a note. It's capital. I'll put 10,000 in this column so that when I come to look later, why did we get 10,000? It was capital. And she'll have lots of little columns. The money from Mr. X. I said, maybe we've sold goods for cash. I'm going to later debit cash, credit sales. The trouble is, again, I'll look at her list, I see we've had 1,000, but we've now forgotten why we had 1,000. You know, why did Mr. X give us the money? Well, while she's got the paperwork in front of her, she enters that we've had 1,000, but she'll have a little column headed up sales, and she'll put it in that column. Simply so that when I come later to debit credit, there's no problems. I can see we've had 1,000. And I can immediately see why we'd have the 1,000. And later, as you'll see, I can do the debits credits. You with me here? And so Liga's book, she's only listing the cash we've received, but she'll have these little columns for every different reason we might receive cash. As many columns as we need. Now, there are two reasons you might receive cash. Cash from the owner. Cash because you've sold goods. Anybody, why else might you receive cash? Anybody think of any other reason why the business might receive money? Hello? There's lots of possible reasons, but there's one very obvious reason why we're likely to receive cash. Anybody think of any other? Mr. X paid us money because we've made a cash sale. If I sell goods for cash, receive cash, later I'm going to credit sales. You agree? Can anybody think of another reason a customer might pay us money?
He owes us money.
Thank you, because he owes us money. We might have sold goods on credit. And if a customer owes us money, surely when we get the money from Mrs. A or something, if she pays us 2,000, What do you do when a customer pays you money when they owe it you? Surely you credit receivables. Would you agree? Hello? When you sell them the goods on credit, debit receivables, they owe you money, credit sales. When they pay you the money, we're going to debit cash, we're going to credit receivables. Well, she'll have another column, receivables. She'll have lots of columns. I'm not going to waste any more time here. But all Liga's going to do, every time we receive money, she will simply list it. She'll have various columns. And she'll also put the amount in the relevant column, depending why we received it. Are you all following me here? She won't do any debits, credits. She's never heard of debits, credits. All she's doing all day, every receipt she lists and she puts it in the relevant column. Okay? Well, in exactly the same way, we're going to have lots of cash payments. And so I employ somebody else. Perhaps I employ Irina, another bookkeeper. And I tell Irina, your job, you're the cash payment lady. Every time we pay any cash, I want you to list it. I'll give her a book. I'll call it Cash Payments Book. I call it anything I like, but that's the obvious name. And in exactly the same sort of way, all she's going to do all day is every time we pay money, she'll make a note. Why might we pay money? We might pay money to buy goods. Do you agree? So suppose we pay 2,000 to buy goods. She'll write down we've paid 2,000. She'll write down whoever it is. There's no rules, write what she wants. But so we don't forget why she's paid that 2,000. Again, she'll have little columns. If that 2,000 was to buy goods, surely that's purchases. And so she'll put it in that column. Then we don't forget. Maybe a few minutes later she pays 100 for telephone. Fine, you've paid cash. Telephone company, again, whatever you want there. But so we don't forget why she's paid that 100. What would the entry be? Credit, cash, debit, telephone. She'll have a column headed up telephone. And she'll enter it there as well. Now, I think you see what I'm getting at. She'll have lots and lots of columns. These books, in fact, these days, obviously less common because of computers, but you can buy, they're quite long books, because you can, obviously cash payments, there are lots of different reasons you pay cash. Telephone, rent, electricity, new car, you know. And so you'll have lots and lots of little columns. Every time she pays anything, lists it, but at the same time, we call it analyse it, but put it in the relevant column. Clear? Well, again, Irina has not done any debits, any credits. She doesn't understand debits, credits. Sorry, Irina. All she's done, all she ever does, I mean, what an exciting job. She simply sits there all day, listing payments, and put it in the relevant column. Okay? We've not done debits, credits, but at least we've got a record. She must make a record every time we pay anything. Okay? Nearly there. What else, though? I said there are only 4 basic types of transaction. Cash receipt, which is Liga. Cash payments, which is Irina. What about purchases and sales on credit? Well, again, I'll employ another bookkeeper. Perhaps Oksana. I'll tell Oksana, all I want you to do is every time we buy anything on credit, I want you to list it. No debit, no credit. But the minute, every time we get an invoice we've bought on credit, I want you to list it. And I'll give her a book. It's got a funny name in a minute, but nothing to write. I'll call it the Payables Journal. And all Oksana does all day is every time we buy on credit, she lists it. That's all. So maybe we bought goods from Mr. X for 100. List it. Maybe we buy from Mr. Y for 300. She'll list it, and so on. That's all she does. No debits, credits. We're going to have a debit credit, but I'll worry about the debits, credits later. As long as she's made a note in this book, we've got a record. I can come in later and actually do the debits and credits. Okay? Well, I'm not going to write on the screen, but there will be a fourth book, a fourth bookkeeper. Help. Oh yes, Inessa. In exactly the same way, I'll ask Inessa to record sales on credit. She'll have a book. Every sale she'll list, and that's all. Okay? All right, well, because we're going to do a little exercise in a moment which you'll enjoy, to save your paper, let me give you the books. You've got there a cash receipts book, a cash payments book, and as you can see, we've got these, we call them analysis columns. As I was saying, the receipts, every time you receive money, you'll put it in the total column, but depending on why you received it, you'll also put it in one of these analysis columns. All right? And similarly, cash payments. Every time we pay money, you'll put the amount in the total column. But then we don't forget why. You'll also put it in the relevant column, depending on why we paid it. Clear? The other books, for purchase and sales on credit, let me give you the other one. Again, this is supposed to represent two separate books. The Payables Journal, the Receivables Journal. Now, because names later can get confusing, can you make a big note? All we're doing in the Payables Journal, you are listing purchases on credit. That's all. Every time you buy on credit, it will simply be listed in that book. You clear? And similarly, the sales journal, I beg your pardon, the receivables journal, I hardly need write. But because later the name can get a bit confusing, the Receivables Journal is where you will list sales on credit. And so with 4 books, in practice we'd have 4 separate bookkeepers. None of them are doing any debits, credits at all. They're listing. But every transaction will be listed in one of those 4 books. All right? Okay. Well, there's one other thing coming, but before I show you, can you look at the example on page 66? Sorry, you haven't got it. I'm sorry about this, but yeah. Let's just make a short start on it together, Just then I can bring in one extra thing. We make a short start on it together, and then we'll have a race and finish it off. But let's have a look. Patty started business on the 1st of January 2008 as a trader in chairs. So appreciate, chairs are what she's buying and selling. Okay? We have a list of transactions. And all we're going to do for the moment is no debits, credits, but every transaction we are going to list in one of those 4 books. So be patient with me, please, because I do want to throw in just one final thing. Let's have a go at 2 or 3 together. Shouldn't take a moment. First of all, Patty, the owner, she paid $6,000 into a bank account for the business. So the business receives $6,000. Which book will it be in, please? Well done, Inessa. Cash receipts book. In your total column, put 6,000. Write something against it. As I said, there are no rules. I think the obvious thing to write here is Patty. She paid the money. And in real life, of course, she'd put the date as well, but we're not worrying here. But at the same time, analyse it. Into which column will we put it, please? Capital. That's why we're getting the money. Boom, boom. Happy? Easy. Let's do another one. B. The business buys chairs for 1,600 cash. Well, I hope easy enough, but which book? Cash payments book. So turn to your cash payments book. In the total column, we paid 1,600. Right, whatever you want against it, I'll write chairs, but it doesn't matter. But more importantly, which column are we going to put it in? Hello? Thank you, Oksana. Purchases. These are cash purchases. It's chairs we're buying and selling. All right? Now, in a minute, I'm going to shut up and you can finish it, but you're okay what's happening? Nice and easy. Just one more, though. Now, although, clearly, normally, you will do them in date order, can I just jump a few? Can you look to E? E. The business bought more chairs for $400 on credit from Chris. Which book will that be listed in, please? Yeah, no problem. Your Payables Journal. We've not paid or received cash, we've simply bought on credit. So can you turn to your Payables Journal? And nice and easy. How much was it? 400, we're doing E. And so, 400, you'd write the name of the supplier, Chris. Okay? Yeah. So, we are all happy, I hope. No problem. However, there is one little problem that can occur. So, listen for a few minutes before I let you carry on. Clearly, in real life, we've only got here about 15, 20 transactions. In real life, there are thousands of them. And what's likely to happen, of course, is maybe a bit later we buy more goods from Chris. You know, we're going to have lots and lots of purchases on credit. Now, don't copy this, but maybe, maybe tomorrow we buy from John for 200. Maybe the next day we buy from Irina for 500. Maybe then we buy some more goods from Chris for 300. You'll have a great long list. You agree? At the same time, maybe every so often we make payments to Chris. We owe Chris money. Obviously, we'll make payments. Whenever we pay money to Chris, it'll be in the cash payments book. So don't write this down. But if I were to tell you, oh, we've paid Chris 200. Fine. We've paid 200. Which column? If you paid a supplier 200 because you owed him money, which column? Payables. Do you all agree? Well, the little problem that can be, imagine we got thousands and thousands of these. Suppose Chris rings up and demands money, and we need to know how much we owe him. It's actually going to be a bit of a problem, because if I want to know how much I owe Chris, I'm going to have to look in this book and start going down this list and say, oh, I owe him 400, I owe him another 300, that's it. Yeah? But remember, this list could have thousands on it. And then I'm going to have to look in cash payments book, and I'm going to see, have I actually paid him anything? Here, 200, but again, there could be thousands of them. And I need to know instantly. If a supplier rings up and wants to check, I can't say, well, wait a day while I go down all these lists, adding them up. And, of course, if you have thousands of items on the list, the danger is you'll miss some and get it wrong anyway. And so, it's quite important that I'm able to find out quickly. I need to know quickly how much we owe Chris, and equally, how much customers owe us. And so, I'm going to employ 2 more bookkeepers. I'll employ Agita, and I'll give Agita a book, and I'll say, what I want you to do is keep a little note of how much we owe each supplier. All right? She's not going to do debits, credits, but I want her to keep a little note. Every time we buy goods on credit from Chris, she'll make a note. Every time we pay in cash, she'll make a note. So that if Chris rings, I can check instantly how much we owe him. All right? Now, how she keeps the note is up to her. She could have little cards for each supplier or something. More likely, I'll give her a book. And rather nicely, if it's a book, then, of course, the 2 pages all over the place. And what she'll do is have little accounts for each individual supplier. And we call it the Payables Ledger. So let me show you, if I've got it. Here we are. The Payables Ledger, this is a little book. And as I say, she'll have pages for each individual supplier. And although it makes sense to use 2 pages, T accounts, do write at the top, this is not debits, credits. There's no double entry. This is simply going to be a note. All right? But right at the top, please, it's note only. It's not double entry. Again, we'll worry about double entries later. But for practical reasons, I do need a little note that we can find out instantly how much we owe Chris. Okay? And so, if you go back to transaction E again, the one we just did. Transaction E, we bought goods on credit from Chris. I can't remember who it was, Innes or somebody, listed it in the Payables Journal. True? But at the same time, we'll tell Agita that we've bought some goods from Chris. And in her little book, her Payables Ledger, turn to your Payables Ledger. She'll turn to Chris's page and she'll make a note that because we've bought goods, she'll make a note that we owe him money. And although she's not going to do double entry, I think it would be sensible, she'll put it on the credit side. She's now got a record that we owe Chris money. All right? She can write what she wants against it. I'll write purchase. But, I'm sorry to keep repeating, but I must stress, this is only a note. So although I'll put it on the credit side, it seems sensible. There is no debit. She's not doing debits, credits. All right? And finally, if I did pay cash to Chris later, don't copy this, but if I did pay cash to Chris, oops, you've paid cash, you list it in your cash payments book, you agree? But at the same time, we'd better tell Agita we've paid Chris. She'd make a little note on Chris's page that we'd paid him. And of course the beauty is, if Chris rings up tomorrow and wants to check how much we owe him, well, we ask Agita, turn to Chris's page, and we can tell instantly how much he's still owing. Okay? Well, I hope that's making sense. Very last of all, though, in exactly the same way, we'll need to keep a check on how much customers owe us. You would agree? And so, unfortunately, we've run out of people. I'll have to do this. I'll be given a book to keep a little check on how much customers owe us. We call it the Receivables Ledger. We'll have a page for every customer, and I'm not going to make up figures here, it should make sense, but if ever we sell on credit, you will list it in your Receivables Journal, which I haven't got, but that's where we list what we sell. But at the same time, whoever's in charge of this book will make a little note that somebody owes us money. We debit the relevant customer. All right? Now, I hope that's making sense.